So for everyone participating, the idea is to first have short presentations from all who are invited, who are the team from the SESAC team, and also Jesper Sundewall from SIDA. And after this, we will have a joint discussion on some topics related to what they work with, but also in relation to SIDA's work with research organizations. And then after this, we will open up the floor for questions, which you can either put in the chat here or just raise your hand later and ask it yourself. But I will keep track of the chat going forward as well. But welcome, everyone. Ola, would you like to kick off with your introduction?
Yeah, I tried to switch in my presentation. Can you see that it says SESAC instead of Lund University?
It's not it's not on presenting mode now, I think.
It's on. Let me try to share it again.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, technology as its best. So very, very welcome to this first of many webinars arranged by SESAC. SESAC stands for the Swedish Competence Center for Satellite-Enabled Social Science Analytics. And it's recently started. We had an inauguration just 5th of March. So it's really a new thing, and it's something that we hope that will stay for very, very long. It very much comes up to you that are listening today and us doing things together. And if there's an interest for that, I think that we will stay, not forever. I think that's a little bit too ambitious, but for quite some time. So today is the first of our webinars. There will be different topics. There will be seminar style. There will be presentation style. There might be something that is more hands-on. But today we have a topic that is dear to many of us in the team. And some of the speakers today are Lina Eklund, and Stefanos Georganos, and Jesper Sundewall. And they share the common interest. They will get the chance to present themselves, but they share the common interest for sustainable development and has a lot to do with data poor and information poor regions. So the idea of SESAC is, it's quite simple. It is easy to say, hard to do. It's to bridge people and pixels. The idea is for this center to work mainly in a Scandinavian setting, but the most of us has a background in outside Scandinavian, and our research has been done in data poor regions, which is not Sweden. So what we try to do is to share some of our understanding, our technologies, our methods with you. But part of the mission is also to, well, it's not a part, it's a significant part of it, is to connect with people from different types of organizations, academia, the public sector, the private sector, to work on some of the pressing challenges and see if pressing societal challenges, and see if we can, by combining remote sensing or Earth observation with other types of data, understand and learn something new. The team, the core team, and that team is expanding, and we want more people to come on board. But the core team is Lina, who will present today. Adel Daoud, I think you were here around. I could see that you joined Adel today. Stefanos, Lia Antonio from Länsförsäkringar, Marcus Grilic, it's me, and it's Tilly and Sai. So that's the kind of the core team. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the the background and the capacity of this team is in questions relating to poverty and equality measurements, crisis and food security monitoring, urban deprivation, segregation, climate infrastructure, and regional resilience. Sometimes from a global perspective, sometimes from a very local perspective, mostly in data poor regions of the world. This team has experiences from working with quantitative data, qualitative data. I would say the whole spectrum of data, and now we are kind of gathering around the issue of Earth observation data, which is a bit rare. It exists in social sciences, but it's rare. And we combine high and low tech methods. We can look at images, we can process images with machine learning and all fancy things. But I think the idea here is not to exclude anything or anyone. I should also say very much in the beginning here that you can find out more about us if you visit our pages on LinkedIn, but we also have a homepage which is called SESAC.se. We combine diverse analytical environments. For example, the AI and Global Development Lab at Lund University, the Geomatics Lab over at Karlstad University, the Urban Analytics groups over at Oslo Met. We also have the quite recent Lund Social Science Method Center, and also the Center for Innovation Research Circle here at Lund University, and of course also Luxus, the Sustainability Center, Klimes, and also Kaiser in Halmstad. I could see you, Hamid. This integration, I believe, is the core capacity of SESAC. I just want to show this one because a lot of this will be about data and sustainable development. And what we see, and I think that one of the starting points for me was basically the interesting integration of machine learning with survey data and satellite images. And the reason to work with satellite images in this context has been, as you see in this image on my left, or the map, is that information on people and societies is quite scarce in a global perspective. We live in a extremely data-rich country. Northern Europe is data-rich, but most of the world is not considered data-rich environments, and therefore it's interesting to consider untraditional data sources. So this map showing that how long it goes between economic service and things like that is suddenly quite obsolete, because we also realized not that long ago that an important data provider, for example, USAID, which I relied on and several in the core team relied on, was just shut down in an instance. We also know that the people tend to answer survey questions with less enthusiasm, if at all. So I started to think not that long ago that even in our parts of the world, the data-rich parts of the world, we might face less data, less information on people, on society in the future. But we also know, if you move on to the image on the other side, that the performance of satellite-based approaches to measurement of sustainable development is becoming better and better, and the abundance of satellite data and additional data sources is becoming better and better. So I think there are some good and some bad. And I think it would be very interesting today to hear what Lina and Stefanos has been working with this type of images, but also Jesper, who is more concerned with it on the policy side and has an overview of that side, how they relate to this kind of forecast or this trajectory that I'm painting here. So just a few words on how the idea how we want to work, and that is, we are trying to situate ourselves in the middle of academia, public sector, private sector, NGOs. Of course, collaboration is essential. So connecting with you, connecting with other organizations is very important. And the idea is very much of co-creation. So we invite you to provide us with ideas, problems, well, why not solutions, so we can create activities, workshop, hackathons, etc. around these things and learn and try to get it to understand more of quite fast changing world. I think that was what I wanted to say as an introduction. And Tilly, what do you say? Should we unleash the first speaker, Lina?
Yes, welcome, Lina.
Thank you both. See if I manage to share also. So 5 to 7 minutes, I heard. Yeah.
Well, you're first, so you.
So I can take double the time, and then Stefanos will not be able to talk at all. That would be mean. So I'm going to try to keep it short. I'm going to talk about conflict remote sensing. And this is actually, I had a satellite image as my first slide image, but then I decided that I changed to this one. It's from my first field work in Iraqi Kurdistan, Duhok, from 2011. And at the time, actually, I wasn't even considering using remote sensing, even though I had studied some remote sensing in the courses during my my bachelor and PhD. But here I was trying to, as Ola talked about, do surveys with people, talk to people, and find out about climate change and migration, and if people are migrating because of climate change. But because there was such a lack of data, I quickly realized that I need some other data source. And that's where remote sensing started becoming very, very handy. So in this very short presentation, I want to show you how I have used satellite images to get forward in my research. And this image is, it's from the Syria-Turkey border. And it became one of the important foundations for a multi-year project that I ended up doing together with colleagues from other disciplines. So what you see here is the border area between Syria and Turkey. And what I think is very interesting is that you can see the border, even though there's no data showing the border, no shapefile showing the border, but you see exactly where the border goes, because there is a very big difference in how much greenness the vegetation is showing, essentially. And I think this image is from 2015. So I was looking at this particular image, wondering if it would look like this if we went back in time and looked over a longer time period. Is this difference between the Turkey and Syria still there if you look at it long term? And that actually was something I asked in connection with this narrative that came up around 2015, where the Syrian civil war had been ongoing for 4 years, and people were started to people started to make connections between a very severe drought and the Syrian uprising that turned into a civil war. So this is one example of the narrative. It's a graphic novel talking about how over half of the country suffered under a really, really bad drought, even the worst drought on record, between 2006 and 2011. And it was more intense because of climate change. People were migrating from rural villages to cities, and that's where, in the cities, that's where the uprising took place. So they're making these really strong connections, and I think by now most people have heard about this drought or climate conflict nexus in Syria. So I saw this narrative and I thought there are some things that are missing. There's some things that are maybe a bit too simple. We need to investigate this further. And the first thing that I did on this topic was to look into these differences across borders. So together with Darcy Thompson, I wrote a paper on the differences in greenness across the borders, and also discussing resource management, who is upstream and who is downstream, power imbalances, and so on. So it sort of laid the foundation for the next steps. And I'm not going to talk through all of the papers. We also wrote a conversation article on this topic, but then we started looking into the idea that the drought had caused an agricultural collapse, and pointing out the fact that most people were only looking at the metrology. They were looking at rainfall levels, but not at how the situation on the ground changed when there was a drought. So we looked into the drought and how it affected agricultural land use, and started showing that the agricultural system had, at least in some ways, recovered from the drought before the uprising started. Then we got funding to go and do field work. We talked to farmers, me and Pinar Dinch. We did interviews with Syrian farmers living in Turkey, and linking those interviews with what we could see on satellite images. We had another paper focusing mainly on cropland abandonment also, and that all of these papers then turned into a big UN report that came out at the end of last year. So if you're interested in this narrative and what we came up with, you can look at that report. I also wrote a perspective article that came out a few weeks ago, where I'm trying to shift the focus away from examining whether drought caused conflict towards more focus on climate adaptation and what is actually needed in conflict affected areas in terms of sustainability and climate adaptation. Another image, this is not from Syria, it's from Gaza, and this is one of the images that I've been looking at in the past few years that has made me think that maybe I'm not only doing conflict remote sensing, but also horror remote sensing in some sense, because what's happening here is that you take an area with agricultural lands, tree crops, and you turn it into a complete wasteland. And I mean, what we see is the removal of biomass, if you take it from a more natural science perspective. But what's actually happening is the erosion of livelihoods, and it has really long-term impacts on the soil quality as well. So we wrote papers on that as well, one for the conversation and one for Science of Remote Sensing, mapping agricultural land, tree crops and greenhouses in Gaza during the first year of what some people call a war and others call a genocide. Where do I want to end with this? I think satellite images are really, really good for figuring out where something is happening, when it happened, to the extent of what was happening. But it's not as good as at explaining who did what and why did they do it, or why was it happening? And I think the perspective from above is really unique. It's really useful, but it's also limited. And there is, I mean, we cannot forget that we have to understand the context of the areas we are studying. Sorry. And in my line of work, where we look at conflict settings, we cannot attribute all the changes to conflict. There are other factors that are taking place. Okay, and final points. I think documenting damage related to conflict is important for accountability. And I want to urge everyone listening to this presentation to not forget to actually stop and take a look at the images of the area you're interested in, because they can tell you a lot from just looking at it, not just counting numbers. All right, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Lina. They are all days. They are very. These before and after images are really strong, and some of us have seen them several times now. They make an impression. So my suggestion here is that we move along with Stefanos, and then we take questions afterwards. So Stefanos.
Right. Can you see my full screen? Hello? Are you able to see my full screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
I see it works well.
Super. Then, yeah, I will kind of stay on the topic of vulnerable populations, but from a different angle. I will be talking about urban vulnerable populations and the potential of remote sensing to fill a lot of data gaps on this regard. So here I will present, I would say, some key outputs from several projects that I have worked with a lot of colleagues over the years. So please wait until the end to see the exact projects I am referring to. But in any case, I will be talking about mapping SDG 11.1.1 using Earth observation and machine learning, which this target refers to the population that lives in slums and informal settlements or inadequate housing. What is a slum, according to the UN Habitat, is defined as areas that have no access to electricity, not good enough infrastructure, enough space, access to sanitation, and so on. However, this is an extremely poorly measured indicator. It is very difficult, as censuses that are typically used to derive that kind of information cannot really map this spatially, and they also have a lot of their own problems. So this is kind of the story that I'm trying to say, how useful can be Earth observation in combination with a lot of data to provide key insights on how we can actually identify where these areas are, where are the slums in the cities, and how many people actually live in them. So when we're talking about census availability, one of the first constraints is I usually bring this figure up, which is basically shows what is how many years have they passed since the last census took place. And I believe the reference year for this map is 2023. So there is a lot of countries that have had no census for more than 15 or 20 years. And we have to also take under consideration that there is a huge degree of urbanization happening there. So, this lack of data, this scarcity, is becoming even more pronounced. So also what Ola mentioned before, that even when a census takes place, there is very poor response rates right now, sometimes in some countries less than 50%. So we have to rely basically to very, I would say, abstract projections that are based on very limited inputs and low quality inputs to make reasonable estimates. Even in the case where we do have census data, they often, for political reasons, for practical reasons, they miss out the number of slum residents, right? Because maybe there is no addresses, so accessibility is difficult, depending on how the census is formatted in each country. but also politically, it can be, maybe measuring poverty to the absolute true degree. It's not something that every, perhaps, authority would want to show. So when we are using, let's say, global population products that are based on census data, but are spatial data, maybe you've heard of WorldPop or Landscan or otherwise excellent products, but when used and are overlaid on slum regions, we can see that are extremely orders of magnitude underestimate the true slum population. Here you can see the black line on this graph that contains self-reported data, and the rest of the colored lines are available population data. So we could actually have a case with hundreds of millions of people actually missing from official estimates. This is another example from one of the most iconic or well-known slums in India, in Dharavi, right? And you can see the actually grounded sampled population that is a bit less than 1 million, about 800,000 people on this red polygon. And this would be the estimate you would get from the census data on the yellow polygon, the more extended area, less than 500,000 people. So we're not talking about, a little bit of error and bias. We're talking about completely, off the charts, unreliable data. And to solve this issue, we have been trying to use and implement Earth observation data to kind of reconstruct this, household definition of what a slum is into an aerial definition, a geographical definition, but accounts for context, connectivity, other variables that are not necessarily part of the household definition. And Earth observation is a very good tool for that because it allows us to scale our work and apply it in areas where we have no data at all. It's constant and it blends very well with computer vision and AI algorithms. We can essentially map both biophysical and socioeconomic phenomena jointly from the same images. So we have been doing all of that. We have been experimenting with all set of images, very high resolution data, building footprints that are derived from satellite images, morphometrics, sentinel data from the European Space Agency, and also local surveys that we run through our campaigns for some of our projects. So we really try to connect our data, our remote sensing data, with ground estimates, ground inputs that are collected with the communities and through the communities to really show how we can improve our understanding of this indicator, right? And colleagues of mine have created very nice apps, very easy to use, where they can quickly do like some sort of micro census, survey people, get information on household occupancy, degree of deprivation, and so on. And this is one of the examples, for instance, where if we would go in Nairobi, in the capital of Kenya, right, where about 90% of the slum residents live in about 8% of the built-up area, so we're talking about extremely high densities, and you would use existing data. So the best available data would be the high-resolution settlement layer from Meta, from ex-Facebook, and overlaid with our survey data, there would be zero correlation. And if you would count all the slum residents, it would be about 651,000 people. If we use our own model that is based on Earth observation data and our local surveys, the estimate, which is still kind of on the underestimating side, I would say, is doubled. We have more than 1 people. So you can imagine if we scale this into hundreds of cities or thousands of cities, we could actually end up with missing hundreds of millions of people, and particularly of the most vulnerable communities. So we have been working with that, also including deep learning in the last years to try to reinforce our population maps. I will not go into details, but you're very free to ask for more. And lately, the work of Sai in particular, who is part of SESAC as well, who has been scaling up this work to detect SDG 1111, so the slum locations, at least, the huge data sets of over 5,000 cities, by using diverse ground data collected by our extended network, and using some machine learning, building footprints, the connectivity, which a lot of them are derived from Earth observation images, to come out with concrete numbers about global urban deprivation, and also very new, I would say, very important findings that a very significant degree of poverty is actually in secondary cities, in small cities, not in the metropolis that we usually talk about, where most of the poverty and slums are accumulated. So about 1/3 of this distribution is found on very small and medium-sized cities. And we also provide national estimates for that. Hopefully the paper will be out in a few weeks. And finally, I would like to close also with the component of citizen science and blending Earth observation, which is very important because socioeconomic phenomena are very complex. And if we miss the opinion, the understanding of the people living on the ground, we will probably create extremely biased models that are affected from our own external and often very biased perspective. So we've been doing experiments as such, and the models are really, really good in the sense that when the people's opinion and understanding from the ground is jointly added into our deep learning models, our AI models, we see that they just represent reality much better. So we would like to keep this tradition of engaging with communities and providing back the results, and not just do some sort of completely top-down, I would say, framework. And this is the, I would say, the umbrella network of our projects, of course, including SESAC as of now. So yeah, feel free to ask or contact me for any questions or clarifications you would like. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stefanos. Ola, your speaker is off.
It's like always, it's a voice inside my head that no one else will hear. I was just saying, thank you, Stefanos, very impressive and very important findings. Jesper, let's turn to you now. And former Lund University, now in the King's capital, Stockholm, not Copenhagen. Maybe a few words about yourself. Maybe that's part of your presentation, but please go ahead. And welcome.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you. And still haven't physically moved, so actually sitting in Malmö at the moment, so not too far away from where you are. So thank you for the invite. I feel like my presentation is a bit off topic compared to what has just been presented with very concrete research projects, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. But just to give you a bit of background, so up until January 1st, I was a researcher at the Division of Social Medicine and Global Health, working on health financing, health systems projects in low and middle income countries primarily. But since January 1st, I've sort of shifted over and become a full-fledged bureaucrat working as the head of the Unit for Research Cooperation at the Swedish Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. And Ola asked me, I think, to give a bit of background to many people have an idea about what SIDA does or does not do. So hopefully here to shed some light on what is actually SIDA's research cooperation all about, and also share some thoughts about that going forward, which I hope will be interesting and useful for you all. Does that sound okay, Ola, and are aligned with expectations, I hope? So I have prepared a presentation which will be a crash course in Swedish development cooperation if you're not already an expert in that. So can you see okay? Thumbs up if you can. Perfect. So this is a picture, I would say, trying to capture our problem statement. What is it, why do Sweden, why does SIDA engage in research capacity building, and why do we have a budget for that in our development cooperation? Well, like many other things in the world, you can make a map and you can see that resources, one way or the other, are extremely inequitably distributed across the world. This could be life expectancy, it could be GDP, what have you. But here it is researcher per million inhabitants, showing sort of the vast difference in the number of researchers active in different parts of the world. And we see primarily in Africa, some countries in Southeast Asia have a very, very low number of researchers. And thus Sweden has a strategy in its development cooperation that targets then research for poverty reduction and sustainable development. And the way SIDA is governed, and I'm going to spend a minute to explain this, is that the government decides on strategies for different areas. Those are sometimes country specific, they could be regional, or they could be, as in our case, a thematic global strategy. The strategies have a time period. Ours is 6 years long, and it comes with an indicative resource envelope of resources that the government intends to commit to this strategy. And quite often they're relatively short, they're relatively broadly formulated. As you can see, we have 3 focus areas or goals. One is to build research capacity or enhance research capacity. One is to sort of support research of relevance for the least developed countries and regions. And thirdly, enhance the impact of this type of research. And this is broadly formulated, but it means that everything we support financially needs to tap into at least one, ideally more than of these focus areas. So everything we do needs to be related. And you can see it's very broad, of course, so many things can tap into that. So what SIDA then does is to sort of operationalize this and say, given that we have this broad overall steering, what do we do and how do we, what organizations, what activities do we choose to support? And we think that it's important, of course, to build local research capacity because we argue that research production becomes more relevant if research needs and priorities are locally identified and anchored. I mean, it's a no-brainer for researchers like yourself, but it's we need to remind ourselves of that. So it's very much sort of partner-driven. We work very much with what we think is an ownership model of the questions being derived from our partner countries and institutions. We also argue, of course, that research absorption improves legitimacy of research findings, and it's enhanced if verified by trusted local researchers. So building, as you can see, it's very much about building knowledge systems that we try to do locally. We do that at 3 different levels. We work bilaterally, so with other countries, and I'm quite new at the job and have been very busy with many things. So I haven't really updated the logos here. Not all these universities are partners anymore, but we work with universities in 4 countries, Mozambique, Bolivia, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And we're currently scoping out a collaboration with the University of Zambia in Lusaka. We work at regional level with organizations such as Karlstad, which is a regional consortium for research training, with BioInnovate and ISIPE. And we have a few of these have also unfortunately been terminated. And then we work globally with, for example, the World Health Organization, the Agricultural Network, CGIAR. And we try to sort of not only work with the budget that we have for research cooperation, and as I said, SIDA gets many strategies, so we get governance from different directions, and quite often there's an overlap, there's a synergy between these different ways of working. One area where we see it very clearly is the prioritized area of health, which is one of the clearest priorities from the Swedish government, and there we work with what we call a Team Sweden approach, which means that we, from the research unit, the research strategy, we support research in the WHO, the World Health Organization, through special programs, which are here on logos, the Alliance, Human Reproduction Program, and TDR. However, Sweden as a country also supports WHO with core support. We also have other strategies and countries working with the World Health Organization, say at country level, at regional level, in different sort of specific areas. So of course there are synergies and win-wins to be made by these different types of support, and that's what we say when we work in a Team Sweden approach. It also means that we do not only work as SIDA, we bring in other agencies. We can bring in the Public Health Agency of Sweden, the National Board of Health and Welfare, universities, what have you, others, the broad resource base in Sweden. But then we have a slightly depressing context, is that we have been getting less and less money. The government says that evidence is a priority. They really focus on evidence in development corporations, but at the same time, the allocations of funding to this area have been dramatically reduced over the last time period. Back in 2022, we had about 1 billion SEK per year for research cooperation. And in the letter of appropriation in December, we received further cuts and we're down to 246 million. So we have a quarter of the funding left basically in 3 years' time. Of course, dramatic implications of how many partners we can fund, how many different areas we can work in. So it's been difficult for us to be forward-looking, thinking about what we can do, in terms of new partnerships. It's been very much about just, sort of ending partnerships, if one should be very blunt. But there are some, I think, strategic choices and things going forward that are of interest also for the academic community in Sweden. Well, one is that we have the bilateral cooperation and we have sort of safeguarded them in these reductions, and we will continue to develop them in the coming years. A clear signal from the government is that they want to see increased interaction with Swedish actors. And that's something we are trying to figure out what that means. That's including academia. For us, Swedish actors is academia. It's also other research council. It's the private philanthropies interested in research. So what we're doing now is we're starting up work trying to become better at being engaging more with the Swedish resource base, like academicians, and I can. One way we're trying to do that is we are planning to sort of pick up and revive the development research conference later this year or early next year, and mobilizing funding for that, so that hopefully that will be a meeting area, a meeting arena for many people like yourself interested in this field. But we're also thinking about other ways of doing it. Can we more actively engage with academia, which in a way can help us to contribute our results without costing a whole lot of money. So we're trying to think in new ways, but we're very, very early in this work. One way that SIDA is trying to do this is to sort of establish more formal academic advisory councils linked to the thematic fields which SIDA operates in. Some of you might even have sort of been approached about this. It's in the startup phase now of establishing these academic advisory councils. Not on my table, like I say, but I do know a bit about it. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there, Ola. This was a sort of a brief introduction to how we work, the context of what has happened in the last few years, and very early thinking about what we're going to prioritize in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jesper. It was really good to get an orientation, because we hear and read a lot about what's going on, but it's good to have someone kind of sorting out what is actually going on. So we have around 45 minutes for our disposal. So, no, sorry, 15. We have used 45 minutes. So I'm thinking of, I have a few. We have prepared questions for you, but I think it's very important also to get the audience to participate. So if there is any questions, you can send them to Tilly, or you can raise your hand and we will integrate them. While you're thinking, I might just ask you, Jesper. So when you talked about evidence, there are a few things here. You were mentioning that there are new ways to working, evidence and things like that, interaction with Sweden, and I don't know, I can't read in my notes, but I think the evidence and the new ways of working, I think that was interesting when you talked about it. What does that mean, and what is evidence in this regard?
Thank you, Ola. I think that the question is being debated internally as well. I think many people would argue that SIDA has always been evidence-based to some extent. But and it's very broad. I mean, overall, the government has sent a signal. They say they want SIDA to become more evidence-based. And now we have tried to sort of, internalize what that means. And it means a few things. First of all, there's been a very explicit ask that SIDA should work more with impact evaluations. Which is something we are a bit sort of, mixed feelings about, I would say. I mean, when they say impact evaluation, they basically mean randomized controlled trials as sort of, the gold standard for evidence informing development cooperation. I think the general understanding is that we have very few supports today that are sort of well suited to be evaluated using an RCT approach, but at the same time it's an explicit ask from the government, so we need to some way to try to sort of meet that expectation. Secondly, it means that we should be better at integrating evidence in our assessment of, when we start up and choose who to work with and in what field to work in. Say, for example, that we are supporting a partner who works with access to contraceptives in country X. And of course, we make an assessment of what sort of things when we decide to pay money to such a partner, but to do that more grounded in, I guess, academic evidence to some extent, or just based on the experiences. But I think more systematically arguing for the choices we make based on evidence and experience, which and I think it's been a bit sort of unevenly done, and it should be. I mean, some things are more sort of grounded in evidence and other things are more maybe grounded in experience, but I think systematically sort of taking into account both evidence and experiences of why we think that this is a good approach and how we have ruled out other approaches or support. And then thirdly, I think just becoming more of a knowledge-based agency by having a more systematic interaction with experts, such as in academia, and that's what we were trying to do now with establishing these academic advisory councils, one way of doing that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. The randomized control trials, that's a challenge, right, when you work with populations.
It's
the ethics approval is quite difficult.
There are many challenges with the randomized control trials, especially, but it's a discussion for a seminar in itself, I think.
Yeah. Hamid has a question.
Yes.
So I'm a machine learning guy, so I don't know how many of you are from machine learning, and I might ask a question that is not interesting for everybody. But I was looking at Stefanos' presentation, and one slide caught my eye very nicely. It was a mobile phone, and there were two pictures, and it was asking a local person that which place would you rather live? Which place is better to live in? And I think it's quite interesting that to have a local perspective on the concepts that we are looking at. For example, in my work with that I did with Ola, we were trying to estimate poverty. But one question is that, okay, let's say that we have made the perfect model to estimate poverty in Tanzania. If we go to, I don't know, Yemen, is it the same thing? Yeah, of course. I mean, from data point of view, maybe you can try to fix it. But these inputs from the locals, I think it can help a lot us machine learning guys, especially in the explainability part, to explain what is it that, for example, says a place has more poverty or less poverty. Maybe something to me, it looks like, okay, it doesn't matter so much, but a local person knows about this. And then that could be incorporated, for example, in a model. And so I just wanted to ask Stefanos, I don't know if he's still here.
I'm here.
Yeah. So how did you incorporate this, and how much did it help you?
Yes, that's a very good point. I can also, before I start talking a bit about it, just mention that this is, I linked a paper on the chat. It's a primary work of my colleague Angela Bascal. And this work was also cited very recently on the UN GeoAI toolkit as one of the good approaches, as you said, taking information, integrating information from locals. So what we did is basically, what she did primarily was that this app was created and there was a set of pairwise comparisons, thousands of pairwise comparisons asking the same question: which area would you rather live in, or which area is better than the other to live in? Which are satellite chips images, right? And then all of these comparisons were put into an algorithm that is used, I think, for matchmaking for games or dating sites, kind of makes a continuous ranking of all of these pairwise comparisons into a ranking, into basically an index. And then this index is used as training data for an Earth observation-based deep learning model that tries to predict deprivation. And the accuracy was remarkable. And I think if we would ask ourselves here, where would be this slums or deprived urban areas, we would never get it right. Because, as you said, there is the locals know what makes an area deprived. It could be, there's a lot of crime there. It could be that the accessibility. There is also patterns that are not necessarily identified through the images, but the images are good enough proxies for them, and also for interpretation if you want to go a step further. So yeah, that was the idea. Now we are repeating it. I think Angela in particular is expanding this experiment in 3 or 4 more cities. So the idea is to kind of try to scale this up, kind of a bottom-up framework.
Yeah. So you didn't do any like explainability studies on the deep learning model?
Not to that degree, I think. What you mean by explainability, at least, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different ways of doing it. I was just curious. I will thank you for the paper. I will take a look at it. It's very nice.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Amin and Stefanos. Adel, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So a question to Jesper in terms of the evaluation. So yeah, RCT is gold standard in terms of internal validity, but there are a lot of studies in terms of observational studies or natural experiments done by development economists, including ourselves. We built an infrastructure of using satellite images also for evaluating impact. In fact, I presented this to SIDA last year, which was fantastic. I was in Stockholm doing that. So I'm happy to continue the conversation, but I'm wondering how much you kind of see that type of work being accepted as at least better than nothing evidence towards evaluating impact.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, I have no problem considering that equally, interesting in terms of approach for determining impact or trying to understand effects. And I think, at some point it needs to be further discussed, what are appropriate approaches. And I think natural experiment is, of course, something we should probably utilize much more in development cooperation. And I think it's a bit, I mean, the sort of in the argument for RCTs, they lean very much on the colleagues that won the Nobel Prize for Economics based on, work on natural experiments. Mm-hmm. And it seems sometimes they're getting confused with each other, what it is we're really targeting here. So I think, as we become better informed, but the problem is always when politicians have sort of say, SIDA should do more RCTs. Yeah. Then we need to sort of, try to respond to that request. And but I think within SIDA, we're not completely locked into it having be RCTs. Mm-hmm. And we're working a lot with, I mean, not we as in myself, but the group trying to take this on is working closely with JPAL. Mm-hmm. Which has been engaged somehow, I think, if it is advisors or something, and also with colleagues at Stockholm University and Stockholm School of Economics. I mean, Martina Björkman Nyqvist, who is a development economist or economist at Stockholm School of Economics, is on the SIDA board, and I think she's very much the person who has been driving this agenda, with the sort of assumption that we, one way or the other, need to have more sophisticated impact evaluations as part of SIDA's, funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I can send you an email. We're happy to follow up later.
Yeah, please do.
It's good, Adel. Never let go.
Never give up.
So, do we have any more questions from the group here, the audience? But Jesper, it's really good that we have you here. So maybe we can pick your brains a little bit more. So how do you see? I mean, what do you see in the future in terms of data needs and things? I know that you talked about the evidence base, and that comes from, it's related to that. But how do you see in the background of what's going on? USAID, as I mentioned in the beginning, and have you considered, specifically the role of Earth observation, and what lies in the future for a center like SESAC and people here that are interested in that kind of work?
I mean, my reflections on the presentations is very much naive since I don't know this field, right? But I find it interesting that you had that slide in the beginning, Ola, where you showed the frequency of sensors, and Lina as well, right? There was frequency of different type of sensors or data surveys of different kinds, and I think that's hugely problematic in my field as well, working in health, right? Is that sort of irregularity of data. And in the current context of the US pulling out, I mean, the US government was for many years the main funder of regular survey data in health, which we have been relying heavily on. And now we have a vacuum, I think, in terms of who's collecting routine data. So to the extent that the work that you do, again being extremely naive, can fill a void in terms of improving the regularity of data that can be used for decision making, that sounds super interesting. I mean, to think in new ways of how to assist governments with regular data that might be in replacing or complementing, for example, census data.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesper. We have 1 trembling minute left. Tilly, should we try to wrap up and close? What do we say as final words? Thank you for participating. That's one thing for sure.
Yes.
Another one is that keep an eye on what we have planned. There are a few sessions coming out. There will be more activities planned for the fall. But also, please, if you have ideas and suggestions for topics, as you can see, there's a wide range of topics covered by what we talked about today. Suggest, and then we see if we can arrange something for you and bring in the people that we need for doing that.
And can I say once more, Ola, as I said it in the presentation, but we have the ambition to sort of revive the Development Research Conference. Plans are not yet formalized, but if we manage, which I think we will, it will be towards the end of this year or early next year. And so keep on the lookout for that as well. And we have the ambition of making it a bit more. I mean, of course, it's going to be essentially a research conference, but also try to bring together more actors that are interested in development research beyond SIDA. So both have SIDA take a bit more center stage, being, informing and trying to find new ways to interact with the academic community, but also the Nordic Africa Institute, Folke Bernadotte Academy, other actors who are interested in this space. So.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to that, Jesper.
Excellent. Sounds amazing.
Yes.
We got one question, Ola, here from the chat. Are there any opportunities to collaborate with SESAC from outside of Sweden? I would say yes, but
yes,
what is your thoughts on this?
I would say just contact Tilly or me, and we can talk about what's kind of the scope of and extent of that, and we can see where we can go.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And super interesting with the conference, Jesper. Looking forward to that. And seeing you in the future, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great sunny weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah. You too.
Happy weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.